We talked about Curtis Martin a little earlier, who has an awesome story that he wanted to share. He's going to share just a 5-minute nugget with us, but there's a tremendous backstory that Curtis continued to allude to. So we could bring Curtis Martin up, who wanted to share a little bit of his testimony. Curtis Martin.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I know it's been a long morning, but I was asked to share a quick testimony, and so I will be as quick as possible. I was speaking to Hannah McNair yesterday, and I was telling her we were at an event for domestic violence, and I was talking to her about my experience with it. And I was telling her I remember at the age of 4, contemplating how I was going to kill my father, because on a daily basis I would watch him abuse my mother so severely that it would just, and as a 4-year-old, you don't really know how to deal with that. And I was constantly in the middle of him beating her up, him blacking her eyes, him burning her hair with a lighter, and putting cigarettes out on her legs. So I remember one day he was lying in the bed, and I was 4 years old, and I started to go get this big butcher knife down in the kitchen, and I was telling Mrs. McNair that the only thing that really stopped me from doing it was that I was 4 years old, so I couldn't remember what side of the chest the heart was on, So I'm sitting there contemplating it, and for me at that time, you're 4 years old, it didn't register as murder. It was literally just getting my father out of the way so that I wouldn't have to see my mother abused every single day. By the time I was 5, my father was gone. My mother taught me how to come in the house, stay in the house by myself till 9, 10 o'clock at night, because she worked 2 or 3 jobs. We had a babysitter that only charged $2 to babysit me every day, and we couldn't afford it. So by the time I was 7, when I was walking home from school, I would carry groceries, I would rake leaves, I would shovel snow or whatever, and every day I'd get home, I'd have $2, $3, $4, and I'd give it to my mother to pay the babysitter, right? So that was when I was 5. By the time I was 9, I lost the most important woman in my life, other than my mother, which was my grandmother, because she was like my mother. We found her lying in the bed with a knife in her chest. I was telling Mrs. McNair that the knife was so embedded in her chest that it was through her heart and sticking out her back and stuck in the bed. And the covers was pulled up to her nose and blood was everywhere. And as a 9-year-old, that is, it's really, really hard to deal with. My mother having to deal with it, at a 9-year-old, as much as I could understand it, it broke my heart. By the time I was 13, the second most important woman in my life was killed also, and it was an even worse death than my grandmother. By the time I was 15, I had my first time a gun was put to my head. Guy pulled the trigger 7 times, no bullet came out. Wasn't pointing the gun at me, pulls the trigger and the bullet comes out. I didn't recognize that, back then I wasn't brought up to believe in God or miracles or Christ or anything. So for me, I'm just a lucky guy. By the time I was 20, I had almost died. I had way more than 9 lives. When I just think about how grateful I am just to be standing here, like I should really be dead. And God has been really, really good to me. One of the things that all that I've been through, and I'm just giving you a snippet because I have to sit down in a second, but all that I've been through, one of the greatest lessons that I've learned is that what you experience in life does not have to define your life. And at a very early age, I learned how to take authorship of my own life and define the experiences in my life instead of allowing them to define me. I read a study one day that they were trying to figure out why people become bitter in life. And what they found was that people don't become bitter because of what they experience in life, but they become bitter because of how they remember what they experienced in life. And so I chose a life of forgiveness, forgiving the circumstances, forgiving the household, forgiving my father. I always say my greatest accomplishment in my life was getting my mother to totally forgive my father before he passed. God has been so good. One of the things that I've learned about God, and I heard Jackie, I believe, mention the verse, is that all things work together for the good, right? I believe that there are 5 reasons, and out of all the problems that I've experienced in life, I've realized that they all fall under one of these 5 categories. And I believe that there are 5 categories that God allows us to experience problems in our lives. Number 1, I think problems direct you. Number 2, problems inspect you. You really get to see what you're made of when you encounter problems. Number 3, problems correct you. Even though I went through hell, I wasn't the best kid going through that hell. And there was a whole lot that my problems corrected in my life to help me to be standing here today. Number 4, problems, what did I say? Direct you, inspect you, correct you. Oh, and another thing, number 4 is problems protect you. There's so many things in my life I thought I wanted to be, that I didn't get, and I realized in hindsight that it was just God protecting me. And 5th and finally, I believe that God allows problems in your life to perfect you, right? I feel that I will be perfected until the day I die, but I'm so grateful for the process that God has me in and the way he is shaping my life, even through the midst of my problems. So for me anymore, I don't necessarily believe that problems happen to you. I believe they happen for you. Thank you.
Awesome. Every time I've heard Curtis talk, it touches my heart. And I praise God for an example like Curtis, which is his life is indicative truly that all things are possible through Christ who strengthens us no matter the circumstance.